Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Andrew and welcome back to another Clip Studio Paint tutorial video. So for this tutorial video, I want to show you guys how you can create a retro style looking coloring process called 4-color process. And this is the way the old school retro comics were colored. Some people know them as dot coloring or bin dot process. It's basically these little dots, but if you zoom back out, they'll create the color you want. Like for instance, this green trench coat, which is what I'm going to show you guys how to do. It's a series of 4 colors in dots and in different densities, and it will trick your eye to think that it's green. So I'll show you guys how you can create an old school looking coloring process like this. But before I show you guys how to do that, let me just say real quick that I have 2 comic books that I've created, and at this website here, Comics Central. I'll leave a link in the description where you can come to my storefront, and they're PDF versions of my comic book. The first comic book here, Book of Fear, is $1, and it's about 30 pages of black and white art. And then the second issue is Book of the Dead. It's continuation of the story, and it's $2, and it's roughly about the same. It's 30 pages of black and white art, but this one I just recently released. I just finished it this year. It's $2. Basically, it's a story of 2 kids who show up late to high school, and they find out that their school has been infested with these zombie-like creatures. The students and staff have been turned into these walking beehives, and they are kidnapping people. So they kidnapping people to be converted into these zombie-like creatures. And also in the there's a side story where the government is involved. So there's the government that wants to contain this outbreak, and then of course there's this elite covert agency that are actually vampires that are send in their agents in to collect the source of what's making these kids into, or the kids and staff into these zombie-like creatures. So they want to get their hands on that. So again, the Swarm Book of Fear is the first issue, is $1, and Swarm Book of the Dead is the second issue. It's $2. Again, I'll leave a link in the description so that you can come to my storefront here, and if you're interested, you can get that. Alright, so let's get into the tutorial. So like I said, what I'm going to show you guys is this 4-color process. Now what a 4-color process is basically this. Well, the old school way. Now with digital coloring, I don't think they color this way anymore. But what they used to do, the 4 colors were sienna, magenta, yellow, and black. And you'll usually see this abbreviated as CMYK. For some reason, the K stands for black. Anyways, sienna is basically blue. That's this little blue color here. And then magenta is this it's supposed to be red, but it's kind of like a pinkish color. And then of course yellow is yellow, and then black is black. And so if you mix them and you change the density of the colors, you can get various different colors. So back in the day, here's a color template that I found online. This company no longer exists, but Comico, the comic company, they would give anybody who wanted to print their comic books through them, and in color, they would send the comic company this color chart and say, hey, just tell us what colors you want and where you want them by these little codes. Now, this is the highest resolution I could find for this color chart. I couldn't find anything with a higher resolution. But you can see here, the very first square here is white. Oh, if you didn't notice, let me go back. So the first thing they do is the yellows. The yellow is pretty much what encompasses all the colors here, and they do it in levels. So this first section here has no yellow, and then 20%, 50%, 70%, and then 100% yellow. So if you want the color white, basically you add no yellow, you add, let me zoom in here now. If you want the color white, you go no red, so no magenta, no blue, no sienna, and of course this first section was no yellow, and then of course also no black. So that's how you get, it's basically the paper. But if you wanted something like the color red, which they give it a code here, R, basically you give it 100% red or 100% magenta, no blue, so no cyan, and no yellow, of course, because this is this whole section here is 0% yellow. So, and then of course no black either. Now if you wanted a darker shade of red, you just add 10% black, which is this code here, RK1, and if you wanted 20% black, you'd give it RK2. And so that's how you can get some darker shades of red. Now you can get more complicated when you go into where you're using some yellows. Let's go here to this third column. So this third column was 50% yellow. So every color here uses 50% yellow. So if you want this this light shade of yellow, which they're calling it Y, it looks like a 3. Yeah, so Y3, you put no blue, no red, and again it's 50% yellow and no black, and so you can get that. But if you want something like, let's say whatever this color here is, you can see now you have Y3, which is 50% yellow, R looks like R3, and then B4, which is so you have the 50% yellow, 70% sienna, which is blue, and you have 50% magenta, which is red, and you have no black. So that code here would tell the printers, hey, I want you to color that section this color. And the way they used to do it in the comic books, so here you can see that this is, it looks like a page from maybe Daredevil, because I see the Kingpin here. But what they used to do, so they would color the pages, and then the colorist would have to go in and point out what colors they wanted in certain areas, and then the printer would take these codes here, and then they would apply that color there. So for fun, let's try to do this, the tunic here. So we can see Kingpin's tunic here. It's Y2 RB2. So let's see if we can find that code. R2 seems to be, or hold on, let me see if I can move this a little bit down. So this is the code we want. So R2 or Y2 is this section here, which is the second column, which means they're going to use 20% yellow. So this is 20% yellow. Oh, I need to zoom in. I had this earlier. Here we go. So R without a number is 100% magenta. You can see here Y2, R, and then B2. And so this is B2 is up one more level. So here, it's like I said, this is the best resolution I can find. So Y2RB2, Y2RB2. So this color here is what the printers would use to color the Kingpin's tunic here, and you can see it's kind of reddish, and then so they wanted a reddish color, so that's what they would use for that. You can kind of see they didn't really point out this, but I would hope that the printer would know that to color that too. They must have. Maybe there was some guesswork with the printers. Who knows? But anyways, that's how they used to get the 4-color process. And so they would take this code here, and that's how they would mix these dots. So they knew how much. These are the angles at which they printed. So you can't print the dots on the same angle because they'll just be overlapping each other. So the printers kind of figured out if you offset these dots in certain angles, you can kind of see all the dots at the right proportion to make the colors. And so the next thing they would do is change the densities. So here's an example here where you can have the color blue, green, and red just by changing the densities of the circles. So here's the sienna. Oh, if we're looking at this first example here in the blue, the sienna here is the dots. You can see they're really big, and then when you go to the magenta, they're a little bit smaller, and then the yellow, they're really, really small, and then the black, they're as maybe a little bit smaller than yellow, but even still small. And so this is what they look like when they're all together. Kind of you see the big blue dot, and then the red, and then the yellows and blacks. But if you were to zoom out, you would see this bluish color here. And so you can, like if you look at the second example, you'll see that the yellow, they really increased it. The blue and the yellow are almost the same size. And then the magenta is really, really small. And the black is a little bit bigger than the first one. And all together, they make the color green. So it's a kind of like an optical illusion. But with digital coloring, this I believe, I'm not sure, I don't work for a printer, but I believe this process is no longer used, as far as I know. But you can simulate it in digital. But I would say that if you were going to print your comic book, don't color it like this. Just color it normal, and then tell the printer that you want to use the 4-color process, and they'll know how to do it, and then your comic book on paper will look like the old school with the dots. Now, if you can't find a printer that still does the dots, then maybe, I don't know if this process will work. I haven't printed this. I haven't printed this example, so I don't know if you color it like this with this process and then send it to the printer, I don't know if it'll look like this. In fact, I don't know how it will look, but it looks cool. Say if you have a web comic, or if you're making a digital comic book, but you want it to look like an old school retro comic, then this is kind of a way you can color it so that it looks like that. I will say that this process is very tedious, and it takes a lot of time, and you have to mess with it to get the right colors, because the percentages that I showed you in that color palette thing. So I'm not sure these percentages, how helpful they're going to be. Actually, they're not going to be helpful for us. And Another thing, I had to kind of guess as to the densities of the colors. In fact, I'm going to pull up my example so that I can repeat. I'll just copy the same settings that I had, but I'll show you how I did it. So here's the output that we're gonna get. So let's start out with the canvas here. Now this another thing about this, we're going to be using Clip Studio Paint's what do they call it? It's the little dots for shading, Zipatones. So Clip Studio Paint has a Zipatone program. It's very useful. You can manipulate it on the fly. I haven't made a tutorial on it, but I will soon, maybe. But so we're going to be using that, and that is very it depends on your resolution and the size of your canvas. So if you're using something a different size than I am and a different DPI than I am, your results will be different. So for the tutorial that I'm showing you, what I have here is 10 inches this way and 15 inches this way, which comes out to let me look at the pixels. Yeah, 6,000 by 9,000. So this is 6,000 pixels and this is 9,000 pixels. And I have 600 DPI. Oops. I need a bigger eraser. 600 DPI. So this tutorial and using this 4-color process, it's basically, it works for these settings. Again, if you have different settings, your results will be different because like I said, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you're gonna have to change the size of the dots and the densities. They're not gonna be the same. So just be aware of that. So for this, I'm using these dimensions. So the next thing you want to do is pretty much bring in your line work, right? So I have something already created. Let me open up. I have this. It's the same piece of work that I didn't import it. Here we go. Import image. So this is a drawing that I did. This is an original character I created. So right now this is a JPEG. So this is what you usually get from your artist, or if you're the artist, then this is what you draw. And basically this is what you need. So I'm going to convert this PNG into a raster layer because that just makes it where I can manipulate it if I need to. Alright, so this is what we have. I turned the paper off, but you can turn it on. It doesn't matter. So the first thing you want to do is pretty much mask out the area that you want to color. So I'm going to create an empty raster layer right below my line art. And for this example, I'm just going to color the coat because, like I said, this is a very long process and I don't want to put you through coloring everything. But I'll show you how I colored everything in my previous one. So the next thing you want to do is grab your lasso and you want to select the areas that you want to color. In this case, I'm going to color the coat. And you can see that some of my lasso is going over the black area, but it doesn't matter because you won't see anything underneath the black. Now there's probably a faster way of selecting an area, but for me this is the more accurate way. So I'm just going to do this side of his coat. So now that you have the area that you want to color selected, what I like to do is I like to just put a dummy color in, or this is called color flattening. Ooh, no, that's not what we want. Purple. This is not the intended color. This is just to help the colorist separate items of different color. We do what is called color flattening. And again, this is not a representation of the color, but more of the area that's going to be a specific color. Because what you would do is pretty much, when you do color flattening, everything that's going to be, in this case I'm going to make his coat green. Everything that's green is going to be this color purple, right? So you get the idea, right? Everything that's, this is called color flattening. And it doesn't matter the color. I just need it so I can do a quick select, right? So anytime I want to add color to the coat, or anything, if I want to add anything to the coat, all I have to do is grab my little selection tool, and I use this one called shrink selection, and I just make a big circle, and the selection area shrinks down to whatever the color is, because that's the only thing that's on the layer is this pink color, so it shrinks down to that. And again, you can see here where I kind of selected the black area here, but you're not seeing the purple, and that's because the color is underneath my line art. So if I were to lower down the opacity, you can see that the color purple is over the black, but you can't see it because the black is on top. So now that you have the area that you want to color, the next thing you want to do is, or what I like to do, is create a folder. And we're going to call the folder, and you'll see later when I show you the complete process, you'll see why it's a good idea to have folders. I'm going to call it coat because we're coloring the coat. And I'm going to put that raster layer in that folder so everything will be organized. Okay, so now what we want to do is add our first dots, right? So again, grab the shrink selection, select your flat color for the coat, and you want to come here to this little checkerboard icon here. It says new tone. You want to click that. This is how you add zip-a-tone, and that's what Clip Studio calls it, tones. So for right now, I have it set to 30. You can make it 27, but you'll see that we're gonna make them. We'll make them 60. Like I said, for this tutorial, these settings work for the size of the canvas that I'm working with. For you, it might be different. You might have to play with it, but for me, this is what works. The density is 30, but we're gonna change that depending on what color we want, so don't worry about that. And then the angle, what I'm going to do is I need to come back to my I need to find the angles. Here we go. I'm going to just go ahead and use these angles here. So the first color that I'm going to put down, this is the other thing, is the order of the colors. So the orders of the colors, actually, I don't know if it matters too much, but from what I've read, they usually go, I think sienna, magenta, yellow, and then black. They go in that order. So I'm going to do it in that order. So the example, the sienna is, or the blue is 15 degrees. So I'm going to do 15 degrees here. Oops, that's too much. So 15 degrees. Hit OK. And now you can see that we have little dots, right? Now, of course, we don't want them black. We want them sienna, right? So what we're going to do now is we come over here to the right side where it says having the layer here. When you create the tones, it creates a new layer for you, and the new layer has a mask, which pretty much means the area you selected, and then the actual Zipatone layer. So with this layer selected, come over here to layer color, and now you'll see that if I zoom in, your dots turn blue because that's the default color here, blue. But what we're gonna do is come down here to your color wheel, and you should have this little tab here, this little second tab, and here's your colors. Your C for sienna, M for magenta, Y for yellow, and then K for black. And if you make your sienna 100% and you make everything else black, you'll have the pure sienna color. And so with these selections 100% 000, you come over here to again to your right side where you have your layer color, and you just dump that color into that layer there. Okay, so that's our first color. Now what we're going to do is create our next color, magenta. So we're going to do the same thing we did. So come back to your flat color layer and grab your shrink selection tool and make that selection again, and then hit the tone icon, and again this number of frequency, I'm going to leave it at 60. Oh, by the way, all four of my colors are going to have the same frequency. I'll explain what frequency is in a bit. And then the density 30, I'm not too worried about. But the angle, I need, for the magenta, 75. So let's do 75. I'm just going to type it this time. And so there is my magenta. And as you can see, it created, you know what, let me do that again. Delete, and then delete. So I'm going to do that again. So there's a step that I forgot to show you. When you hit the tone icon, there's this selection box down here. I think by default it's checked, but you want to uncheck that. What this checkbox does is it combines all your Zipatones on one layer, and that's not what we want. If you do it all on one layer, you can only have one color, and again, that's not what we want. So make sure this selection box is unchecked. And so I'm going to do the same thing, 75. And so now if we zoom in, and so now you can see we have a new layer underneath our sienna layer. And if we zoom in, you can see that they're kind of offset. The sienna and the black are they're offset, right? That's what we want. That way you can see both colors. So again, we're going to come to this layer color on the right side, layer color, and again it goes to the default blue, but in this case we're going to come back to where our color wheel was and increase the magenta to 100% and decrease the sienna to 0%. This is pure magenta. We're going to come back to the right side in the layer color and dump that in the paint there. And you can see that now we have, if I take away the mask, now we have the sienna and the magenta, and you can see both those colors. If you kind of zoom out a little bit, you can start to kind of see a blue, like a bluish pink, which is what we have. You're seeing purple because that's of course the flat layer, but we'll be removing that. So yeah, so now the next color is yellow. So again, come back to your flat color layer with your shrink selection tool. Select your area. Do the, let me see, what angle is the yellow? 0. Oh, I opened up the wrong thing. So, and now we can put 0 here. And so now we can see we have even more dots. So we have, sorry about that, I opened the Clip Studio assets thing. So now you can see that we have the let me blind the flat color. So we have the sienna, we have the magenta, and then you can see the black dots, which we will change to yellow. Again, on the right side, you go to layer color, lower down on the color wheel, lower down the magenta and increase the yellow to 100%. Go back to the right side, dump it in your color layer. Now if we zoom out, you can see kind of a grayish color. And then the next color, of course, is black. So come back to our flat layer, and again, shrink tool or shrink selection. Hit the black, and what angle was the black again? 45. So just put 45. And of course, remember that I'm always keeping the frequency at 60, and again, that frequency is for the specific dimensions of the canvas that I'm working with right now. And so I'm going to hit OK. And because the color is black, I'm going to leave it as black. There's no need to change the color layer. Unless, of course, you want to use something other than black, like maybe if you come down here to the color wheel and if you lower yellow to 0, you can see the K factor. It doesn't have to be black, exactly black. You can go maybe 80% black or something, just to make it, you'll see that the black is what gives the color darkness. So we'll look at that. So now that I have all 4 colors, sienna, magenta, yellow, and black, in my drawing here, I no longer need the flat color. I don't want to make my coat I don't want to make my coat purple. I want to make it green. So we're going to get the color green by manipulating the densities. Now you'll notice here that on the layers, that number 60 on all the layers, that's again, like I said, the frequency. What the frequency is the distance between each dot. If you notice, that's the one. You'll notice that if you look at this first example here, this blue, or actually let's look at the second example, green, because that's the color we're going to make, green. You'll see that the blue, the siennas are much larger than the magentas, but the frequency, what they mean by frequency is the distance between the center of this dot and the center of this dot, this distance is the same as the distance between this dot and this dot. Even though the sienna, they look much closer together, but that's because they're bigger. So the frequency of each of these four colors is the same distance. Even though your eye is probably telling you, no, this sienna is much further. That's not the case. They're the same distance. So, like I said, for the canvas that I'm working with, this for this 6,000 dp pixels, 6,000 pixels this way and 9,000 pixels this way at 600 dpi, I found through trial and error that a frequency of 60 kind of gets me the that grainy look of the old school comics that I want. Now the way that I'm going to create this here, the big dots, little dots, is by changing the densities. The densities can be manipulated. So again, if we look at if we want to make this green, we can see that the sienna and the yellow are the same, but the magenta is very small, and then the black is a little bit bigger than the magenta, but not much bigger. And so that's what I'm going to do. So the sienna, if you click the sienna layer, you can come here on the right side. If you're still in the layers tab here, you'll see a selection here called density, and it has a little slide bar here. And you can see as the more I slide it, the bluer it gets. And that's because if you see here, I'm zooming in, you can see that how big and small the dots are getting. As I slide it down to 0 or to 1, you can't go to 0. So there's a density of 1. Very, very tiny sienna. And then of course, if you go 100, don't go 100, because that's pretty much a solid color. You're not going to get the dot effect. So I'm going to, for right now, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to put the density at 60. And remember, the sienna and the yellow were the same density, or close to it. Well, it looked like it to me. So I'm going to make the yellow also 70. But the magenta was very small. It was the smallest of the three. So I'm going to put that at 10. And then of course the black was also small. I'm going to put that at 20. Let me get rid of this. So if we zoom back out, you can kind of see it looks kind of green, right? So there's one more step we have to take. If you kind of notice, if you zoom in right here, this is right here, the green example that we're doing, you'll notice that when the yellow overlaps the blue, it kind of makes that green, right? And then when the yellow overlaps the magenta, it kind of makes that reddish color. And then the black is just there. It doesn't want to give either way. So that's what we're going to do now. The way we're going to accomplish that, because if you look at ours right now, you'll see that they're just solid colors. Because the sienna is the top layer, the sienna is overlapping everything. It's not letting the yellows come through as much, or the magentas. The way we can change that is when we select our sienna layer, you come up here to the layer property. It's this little drop down here. They're calling it the blend mode. Put it on multiply. And do the same thing for each of the layers. So the sienna, multiply. The yellow, multiply. Now, it won't do anything for the black. If you do multiply, black is black. It's not going to give. So just leave that normal. It's not going to make a difference. So now if we zoom back out, now you can see your coat, or the coat, not your coat, but the coat is green, right? And it has that really grainy look, like comic books did back in the old days. And so that's how you can manipulate your digital coloring to give it that retro feel. Because what I've seen online before, or tutorials, is that they would color it a solid color, like they would color it green, and then they would use the tones and put the dots, but make the dots a little bit darker green. But that's not really how the old school comics were colored. It may feel like that's what I'm saying is, this is what they used, or what I've seen online is they would come and just select green. Let's say green here, and I'll just create a circle here, right? They would say, okay, there's my color green, and then what they would do is they would select that, and then they would put a Zipatone over it, and they would make it like a darker shade of green, and they would dump it in here, and let's see, they would increase the density a little bit maybe, and they would say, oh look, there it is, that's my old school coloring, the dots. But that's not really how it worked. And sure, I mean, it's a quick shortcut, and maybe it gives it kind of a feel of the old school. But if you really truly want to do it, how the printing presses did it, this is how you do it. Like I said, though, it's very time consuming, because you got to make all the selections, and then you have to manipulate the densities, because if you start to change the densities, remember, don't change the frequencies. The frequencies have to be the same, but the densities of each circle. See, if I lower the sienna, start to get it kind of a yellowish kind of a coat, and then maybe increase the magenta. Now I'm kind of getting a brownish reddish coat. Maybe decrease the yellow, now it's a purple. Or maybe, increase it. You can do all kinds of stuff, and just by messing with the densities, you can get different colors. Let me go back to green. You can get different colors, which is what they were talking about when they were doing this here. This is what they were, the 20% and the 50%, all these percentages, that's the densities. That's what they were talking about. And that's how they would get these different colors. And so we're kind of doing that with, we're manipulating it through Clip Studio Paint, using the, what do they call, the tones, to get that feel, right? Like if you zoom in, you can see that doesn't look like green. Well, maybe some spots, but you can see the blues, siennas, and stuff. But when you zoom out, it really looks like green. Now, like I said, this is not for if you want to send it to the printers, and you want your comic book printed in dots. This is not how you do it. If you want your comic books printed like the old school in dots, just tell your printer. Just tell them, hey, I want a green coat on this guy, and they'll know how to do it. You don't have to do this process. This is only so that, let's say you have a web comic or you want to create a digital comic, then to get that old school feel, you have to do this process, because just going in and selecting the color green and then doing this, coloring it green, it's not You know, that's not how the old school comics were. They had dots. So this is how you do it. Now, the next step that you're gonna have to do is, like I said, if you want to make a digital comic, digital stuff on the internet, they're not. You cannot make the CMYK file. It has to be a RBG. That's a different kind of style. Remember, I told you the CMYK stands for the sienna, magenta, yellow, and black. Well, computers or pictures online, digital pictures, they're not CMYK. They're RBG, and that's because monitors, computer monitors, and tablets and stuff, the digital screens use red, green, and blue. Those are the three colors they use to make the different colors that you see on the screen. So when you save your file, you can see that CMYK and RBG are kind of different. In fact, I have the pictures here. This color here, this is CMYK. Oh, let me show you. Let me just show you. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to export this single layer as a JPEG, and I'm going to put it on my desktop. I'll call it comic. That's fine. And when I hit save, it brings me up this pop-up menu, and this expression color, you'll see that there's RGB color, and then there's also CMYK. I'm going to hit the CMYK, and because my file is so big, or my canvas is so big, I'm going to lower it. I'm going to only do 50%. So again, at 100%, this is 10 inches by 15 inches at 600 dpi. I'm going to lower that by half, just so my file can be smaller. So now it's 5 inches by 7.5 inches. I'm gonna hit OK, and when that saves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save another one, but I'm going to save it as RGB, and you will see that there is a difference when files are saved as RGB, and then when files are saved as CMYK. Desktop. Oh, I gotta change the name. I'm gonna do Comic 2. Hit save. And again, I'm going to choose RGB, 50%. So now let's go to my desktop. Let's get rid of all this. So here is, remember this first one, this is CMYK. This is RGB. I don't know if you guys can see the difference, but there kind of is a difference. Man, it's much harder to see it on this on the Mac. Well, I know you can see it on a PC, on a Windows. They kind of look the same, but there is a way. Again, you cannot save CMYK online. Like if you want to upload this picture onto the internet, it's gonna say you can't do it because the file format is CMYK, or it might just convert it to RBG for you, and you'll notice that the colors, they kind of change. So one trick to manipulate these colors that you're seeing on the screen to look like CMYK, but they're actually RGB is to play with the hues and saturation of your colors. The way you do that is I usually set it up here at the very, very top layer. And you come here to, where was it? Layer. And then you do new layer or new correction layer. And the second option here, it's the hue, saturation, and illumination. So these three options here will let you manipulate the hue and saturation. So the hue, you can see that if you're at 180, it's purple, and if you're at 180, it's purple again. But you can change it to, and of course 0 is the default, you know, what you were in the start. So you can lower the hue, and then the saturation, of course, if you're at 100, it's black and white pretty much, and then if you're at 100, I mean, it's like neon green. So usually I found it, if you go negative in the saturation, you start coming closer to what CMYK colors are. For some reason, CMYK colors, they kind of look a little bit duller than RGB. RGB seems more vibrant. I don't know, that's my opinion. But usually, you know, you mess with these settings here until you get the shade of green that you want. Because remember, you're staring at a computer monitor, and these colors are RGB. So by manipulating the hue and saturation to get it kind of a dullish color, you can make it look like CMYK. And that way, now when you hit OK, what that does is it creates a layer on top of everything. You can see it here. It says the hue saturation layer. And if you turn it on and off, you can, well, I made very small changes, but believe me. And if you're not happy with that, you can always double click this layer here, right? And it'll bring it up again, and then you can continue manipulating it, right? Hit OK. And so now that's your hue saturation. You can turn it on and off. You can see how it changes. Again, if you're not happy, go back, change it to whatever. You know, it's all up to you. It's very flexible. You can change it on the fly. Very useful. So yeah, that's how you can create the 4-color process look for a digital drawing. Again, people don't. If you're gonna send your drawing to the printers, don't do this. Don't send the printers this and say, hey, give me a 4-color process. Because they don't need you to do this. You just tell them, hey, I need, you know, you're gonna have to ask for this chart. Every company or any company that does the 4-color process has to have this chart, because you need to tell them the codes. You need to tell, hey, I need the Y2RB2 in this area, you know. So this is only for like digital comics. Like if you're gonna put this on the internet somewhere, on your DeviantArt or whatever, on your Instagram, this is how you do it. But if you're gonna send it to the printer, just color it green. You know, on the color wheel, choose green and color it, and then tell the printer, hey, can you do a 4-color process? And then they'll say yes, and then you'll be like, okay, yeah, I need this code here, this code here, this code here. And so yeah, so let me show you. So this is the full colored character, and so you can see here on the right side, this first folder here. Oh, here's the first layer actually is the saturation. So you can see I I manipulate it a lot. You can see here's without the hue saturation. So these are RGB colors using the 4-color process. But I want it to look like CMYK, so I messed with the hues and the saturations, and I got this color here. It's kind of a dullish, it makes it look dull, but that's the way it is. And then this first folder here, this is pretty much my line art and stuff. And then so here, this second layer, it's the blood stripe. So here is, he has a little blood stripe underneath his chin here. And because I needed a red, I only needed, I didn't need any sienna. Sienna was 0, so I didn't need sienna. So I just used the magenta and the yellow. And I put a little bit of black to give it a dark red. Like if I take away the black, it makes it look, it's still red, but it's not as dark as if you add a little bit of black. I don't know, maybe it looks better without the black. We'll leave it without. And then the next one is the flesh color. So this is how this is the flesh. Oh, sorry, this one. This is the flesh, and so you can see that what I did was I selected the hand, then I selected the body, and I selected the other hand. I did it all at the same time, so they were all happening at the same time. I didn't do one at a time. I selected all the areas that needed flesh color, and then I created these colors. And you can see I have the sienna and I have the black off. So I really didn't need those. I haven't deleted them. I just, because if you add the blue, he kind of makes it look bluish. I was messing around with it. So all I needed was the sienna and the yellow, and that pretty much did it for me. The next was the coat. So here's the coat. I used all colors to get the green. And then the pants. The pants were just, they weren't black. They were kind of a grayish color. So with the pants, they're still dots, but I believe so the color layer that I used was not straight black. It was, I think, 80% black. And because just having one layer of it was just wasn't cutting it for me. I mean, I guess if I use straight black, maybe that'll, yeah, I could do that. But I don't know. I didn't like it. I used 80% black, and what I did was I set that at 75, an angle of 75, and then I created another black, the same 80% black, but at a 15-degree angle. And so they kind of create this little pattern here. So that's for the pants. And then of course the belt. The belt was a yellow, but also a very small hint of black to give it not just yellow, but and it's not 100% yellow. There's white and stuff in there. So like if I increase the density, right now I'm at 70. If I increased it to 100, I mean, it's just solid yellow. But I wanted it to be not yellow, but, you know, just a little light shade of yellow. And a little dash of black to give it a darker kind of, like a tarnished gold or something. And then, of course, that's it. I believe that's it. What is this? Oh, this was the original. I don't need that one. No, that's the sketching, the blue line sketch. So yeah, and so that's how I colored the whole thing. I separated it with folders, and if I needed to add the sienna, I added it. If not, I took it out. You know, and I manipulated the densities, and that's how you get the 4-color process. So I hope I'm not missing any steps. If you guys have any questions, just leave them down in the comments. I hope you found this video informative. I hope you learned something. And yeah, I think that's about it. I think I covered everything I wanted to talk to you. Oh, again, if you guys don't mind, like I said, I have my comic books on Comic Central. Issue 1, Book of Fear, is $1, and Book of the Dead is issue 2. It's for $2. So if you guys are interested in that, there's a link in the description where you can get those. And I really appreciate you guys watching. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I make Clip Studio Paint tutorial videos like this one. Not as long though. Most of them are 20 minutes or less. I try to keep them short. But this one, this was a long one. I apologize. But yeah, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And I will see you guys in the next one.